While I'm on the subject of fine art, because I am always on the subject of fine art, the debate on whether or not video games should be considered art is long, complex, and one I am not going to get anywhere near, nor am I qualified to. The most common pro-art argument I've heard though is how they're impressively somehow able to extract more emotions from me than just a state of consistent numbing amusement, meaning that they can be more than just a toy to pass the time. Despite what you'll hear from the Fisher-Price of video games. Feelings ranging from crippling sadness, states of fear, anger, and loneliness all have the potential to be made worse. Some even get their own genre, like comedy, horror, and horror comedy, two conflicting emotions you'd think would neutralize each other. To be scary, horror needs to be taken seriously, and to be funny, comedy needs to preferably not involve stabbing. But regardless, horror comedy has existed successfully for years, but so has Rallycross, and it's literally the worst way to experience either of those two things, because somehow and some way it has been made to work, more than once, which is both impressive and stupid, right? Like someone who's managed to pull their head out of a banister. Good job, but you're a fucking idiot. My favourite example of which, by far, and one I could quite literally talk about for an entire video, comes from my favourite game of all time. Obviously, I'd never flat out call myself a genius connoisseur of fine art, but the games I choose to play definitely appeal to exactly that aspect of me. Timesplitters Future Perfect's 5th level Mansion of Madness. Why a mansion? Because hey, they haven't done Resident Evil already, despite having done Resident Evil already, would be, in my opinion, and using the methods I'm about to go into, the closest horror and comedy could possibly get to each other successfully. Little bit of comedy there already. So you can see that's a little taster of the level we're dealing with. Probably the height of comedy. Opening outside of the mansion and setting the scene with that perfect cold, spooky amount of colour, making it feel like that time of day that could just be any fucking time of day, it's very quickly obvious that the pacing is entirely different from the previous 2 games and 4 levels, because horror games, to be scary, need to make the player feel like they're not in control. The problem being, however, that not being in control makes the player feel like they're playing a shit game, especially since the Timesplitters series is and has spent the first 2 games and 4 levels establishing itself as a fast-paced first-person shooter, with, to be fair, the exception of very few tragic set pieces, turret sections and puzzles. That's if a barrel rolling slowly and safely down a shallow incline counts as a set piece. That was close. Here though, and starting the moment you enter the mansion, each room stops you, presents you with a little scene, each with its own problem, all of them usually concluding with something dying.
Don't come in here! We've done something terrible! Wait! Ah!
Ew, that is gross.
Then just leaves you to deal with it. It's genius. Obvious now, looking back and not having to come up with that solution ourselves, and it definitely wouldn't work for an entire game, but it means it can create a sense of danger out of your control, while at the same time keeping the ability to also be that same danger to every breathing thing around you. As well as that though, just because of the fact that it's so different, throws you off to a point where it's almost scary on its own, because you don't trust it anymore. You genuinely have no idea what to expect around every corner you take.
It's not real! It's a bad dream! It's not real! It's not real!
Unless you watched a video that ruined it all. And there always is something different around every corner you take, again smashing that nice little bond of trust you've been establishing with the series. Like for example, there's a point around halfway through the level where there's a clear direction you're supposed to be going in, but there's like 4 unlocked doors surrounding it. Sneaking off to explore the rooms gives you a feeling that even in this level and how it's played so far, you're leaving the comforting embrace of what you know, that the first person shooter you signed up to play isn't there to hold your hand anymore, that anything you find, despite definitely being put there for you to find, you found on your own and shouldn't be seeing, especially since they play no part in the story. Things like moving rocking horses, the TVs set to empty channels, the paintings, the skinned man are all really— wait, what was that last one? Are all really fucking huge Cliches, I know. All I can do is say that like everything Timesplitters does, it's a cliche for a reason, and in the context of the level, it all works really well. And if that doesn't work, I'll try and pass it off as comedy. That'll definitely work. You can't criticize that, you're not allowed. All of it though, combined with that music from the GoldenEye composer no one cares about enough to credit half of the time, really gets you in that specific fun mood, where you just want to get caught up and be scared even if the level never tried. It's not the longest or most memorable song, but there's so much going on that just skipping around to any short point might as well just be an entirely different song on its own. Making it feel dynamic in the game because of how little time you spend in each room and how, again, something different is always happening, despite not being dynamic. It would have been nice though. And that's where most of the comedy comes from. There are jokes everywhere.
Don't let them eat my brains!
Do you think anyone would notice?
But they really don't get in the way unless you let them.
Ugh, will the grossness never end?
Alright, let's just get that right down there. There we go. It's just so exaggerated and stylish that it can break any time it wants without affecting any kind of consistency, because the horror elements are just as much a joke as literally everything else, which is exactly what makes it all work as well as it does, and what makes this not just my favourite level of all time from my favourite game of all time, but the most standout example I always instantly think of whenever trying to justify the fact that horror can work with a joke. And that, I am qualified to go into, because my life is one.